Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm beyond excited to bring you along on an incredible adventure today as we dive into the heart of Ecuador to experience one of the most mesmerizing wildlife encounters out there, hummingbirds. This particular reserve has been on my radar for quite some time, and now you and I are finally visiting. Nestled in a remote, picturesque location, it's the perfect setting for these tiny, vibrant creatures. I've heard so much about the diversity of hummingbird species here, and I can't wait to share that experience with you. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to learn and marvel at these fascinating little miracles in their natural habitat. After considerable planning, the day finally came to make our way there. It all began by waking up in the middle of the night, around 2 a.m. We were going to be spending the next 6 hours one way on a bus. 2 buses, in fact, as it would require a transfer. We finally arrived after a long and windy ride. From the moment that we step onto the reserve, I'm hopeful that we're going to be blown away by the surrounding beauty and the variety of hummingbirds we're about to see. So grab your virtual passport, sit back, and join me as we explore Ecuador's hummingbird haven. Trust me, you won't want to miss this one. Let's get started. Press the like button if you like videos like this. Some of the species that we anticipate seeing are completely new to me, such as the Gould's jewel front, a chunky hummingbird with a stout bill, glittering green with a huge orange breast patch and purple forehead. The male has a black chin. It's mainly a lowland species but ranges well up into the eastern foothills of the Andes in some areas. It's rather scarce in mature humid forests and occasionally visits feeders. Secondly, the Napo saberwing, a large dark hummingbird found in cloud forests along the east slope of the Andes. It ranges from far southern Colombia south to northern Peru. The male has a large blue patch on its throat and breast, and a glittering green crown. Also note the white spot behind the eye. Still more exotic species that we expected to see are the many-spotted hummingbird. It's a large hummingbird of the Andean cloud forest. It ranges along the east slope of the Andes, far from southern Colombia, south to Bolivia. Both sexes are similar. Note the white spot behind the eye and white underparts boldly spotted with green. It's generally scarce but visits feeders in some areas. The black-throated brilliant, a large hummingbird with a stout bill. The male has a black belly and a black throat that is bordered below by violet. The throat may appear all dark from some angles. The fork-tailed wood nymph is a fairly small fork-tailed hummingbird of the lowlands. Males have an iridescent green head and breast and a violet belly, but in poor light, it appears evenly dark overall. Note the slightly drooping bill on both sexes. One of the most common hummingbirds in lowland Amazonia. It's found in a variety of open forest habitats from young rainforest to forest edges. The golden-tailed sapphire, a small hummingbird of humid lowlands. Males are iridescent green with a bluish face and rich golden rump and tail. Females are similar but lack the blue face and are paler, gray below. They're usually found around forest edges and often one of the most common hummingbirds at feeders in their range. The green-backed hillstar is a large hummingbird with limited range on the east slope of the Andes from southern Colombia to Ecuador. Overall, it's bronzy greenish with a blue throat and a very long straight bill. Look for bold white flashes in its tail, especially visible in flight. It could be confused with the last line or Napo saberwing, but note the straighter bill and white tail. It's uncommon and occasionally visits feeders, but equally likely to be found within the forest, especially around streams and waterfalls. It occurs from around 1,000 to 2,000 meters in elevation. Here's an insider tip. I happen to know of a spot where this bird is very common and numerous at feeders. You can access and film them with ease here. In fact, it might be my favorite hummingbird spot in all of Ecuador. You can find out where that place is in this video here. The wire-crested thorntail, a small compact hummingbird found on the east slope of the Andes from central Colombia to central Peru. The male is unmistakable and cute as a button. Look for a long pointed tail, wire-like crest, and a short straight bill, and white band across the rump. It occurs in the foothills from around 600 to 1,600 meters. It visits feeders but also can be seen at flowering shrubs, especially purple verbena and trees. The collared Inca is a large, flashy hummingbird and is a common resident throughout much of the Andes, where it inhabits lush cloud forests and frequently visits feeders. Note the white breast patch and the long straight bill. The white tail markings really stand out when it flares its tail, which it often does when interacting with other hummers around the feeders. The male is darker than the female, sometimes almost black, which makes his colorful crown patch even more evident. The green hermit is a large hummingbird with long white tipped central tail feathers. The male is entirely blue-green and the female has a gray belly, green back, and obvious stripes on its face. Both sexes have a bill that's extremely long and decurved. It's found in the forest, but also visits feeders at the forest edge. It's not easy to see away from feeders because it often flies through the forest understory very quickly, even for a hummingbird, occasionally stopping to feed at flowers. The violet-headed hummingbird, a tiny compact hummingbird. Note its short straight bill and bold white spot behind the eye. The male has a bright violet crown and throat. The female has paler bluish crown and a gray throat. It often flies with its tail slightly cocked, most often seen feeding on small purple flowers in gardens, but also found in forested areas and edges. We're going on another hummingbird adventure real soon, so make sure you click subscribe and the blue icon so you always know when the next video is coming out. In life, reality and expectations can often be very far apart, and in this case they certainly were. Here's what really happened upon our arrival to this reserve. Hey everyone, we've traveled a great distance and a lot of time to get here to Narupa Reserve, and being honest with you, it's been a universal pretty large disappointment. For several reasons. They require you to reserve ahead, call ahead, let them know you're coming, which we did, and we ended up being a little late on that time because, you know, we're foreigners and we're on the bus, so it took longer to get here than we thought. So the ranger decided, you know, because we weren't on time, to not bother filling the feeders. And also when we did finally get here, the gates were locked, so we had to improvise to get in. Once we finally went to the effort, which was considerable, we show up to 6 empty dry feeders and no hummingbirds around, unfortunately. The feeders here should likely be filled every day regardless of whether they're expecting visitors or not, because how would you condition the hummingbirds to come in on a regular basis if you're letting the feeders go dry for days on end? When they finally arrived, which they said it would be 15 minutes and it was 45. They finally arrived and they scrambled to fill the feeders. And what happens, you can see here, this one here especially, it's absolutely full of bees. So even the very few hummingbirds that have been coming here can't get anywhere near the feeders. It's difficult right now to hide our disappointment. We spent 6 hours plus on the bus trying to get here and eventually arriving. I would suggest to Narupa and Hokotoko Reserve that there are many things that they could do better at this particular reserve to welcome tourists, and along with those tourists, the money that keeps the places like this going. So maybe someone watching this video can take this message as helpful and start making some adjustments. It was not very welcoming for a couple of tourists that didn't know where they were going. A point on that is that apparently there's 2 entrances to this place. There's no mention of that whatsoever that we could find. And so when we got down here, the worker guy talked to us like, how did you not know there was 2 entrances to this place? Like, everybody knows that, and we're the stupid ones. We were planning to meet you guys up top and you came in the bottom, and we're like, well, that's news to us, man. We're first time we've been here and there's no information available on the website. So we're sitting here after considerable efforts at Narupa Reserve watching no hummingbirds, and now we have to leave very soon. So of the many hummingbird reserves we visited here in Ecuador, this would be towards the bottom of the list for satisfaction, and one of the ones we would recommend the least for you to take time and effort to visit. They have advertised in their pamphlet a couple of hummingbirds that we were very much looking forward to seeing, first and foremost being the Gould's jewel front, or Gould's jewel front. Once we arrived, we then found out from the ranger that, oh, it's very rare and it's infrequent visitor. Why then would you have it in your brochure, Hokotoko? That doesn't seem to make much sense. And that's the second time the exact same thing has happened to us. When we visited Copalinga, front and center on their attraction page was the Spangled Coquette, which, come to find out, doesn't appear there very often. And I think it had been 3 months since it was spotted in that location. That is not advertising that's going to get you return visits and favorable reviews. It's not often I do this, but based on this experience, I would recommend that you visit one of the other more professionally run wildlife reserves in the area. There's actually one not too far from this location that I can recommend. And if you like, just ask me what that is in comments and I'll provide you the location and the name. We'll see you again soon in the next one. Thanks for coming along.